Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests and dear friends. Welcome to today's special event. The title of this event, as you may notice, is very special because we're so hooked in by headlines. But we have to be aware there are a lot of stories beyond headlines.
Yeah.
So today's event, Beyond Headlines, the Human Story of Americans in China. It's a special event. It's also official book launch and a conversation with the author, Professor William Brown. He also has a Chinese name, Pan Wei Lian.
Wait.
Yeah, he also reminds me it's not the common translation of William, right? William. It's Wei Lian.
Yeah.
That's a
Wei Lian's a prince in England. I'm not the prince.
Yeah. Obviously, but also like
Obviously.
The Confucian values, right?
Yes, yeah.
So my name is Henan Cheng. I'm the executive director of the Center on Chinese Education at Teachers College, Columbia University. On behalf, so that's my title, that's my affiliation. So here's the twist. On behalf of the Renwen Society of China Institute, I'd like to welcome everybody and also want to extend heartfelt gratitude for your support for make this event possible. Thank you very much. You may wonder why a person from Teachers College, Columbia University joining this event and hosting this event. Is because the close partnership, historical ties between China Institute and Columbia University, more specifically Teachers College. As we know, if you're a friend of China Institute, the four founders of China Institute, Jiang Dui, Paul Monroe, Guo Bingwen, Hu Shi, they were all affiliated with Columbia University. More specifically, three of them, Jiang Dui, Paul Monroe, and Guo Bingwen, they either taught or they studied at Teachers College, Columbia University. So it's no coincidence that we have these scholars, educators. They promote the founding of China Institute 100 years ago, exactly 100 years ago. And another layers there's a historical tie is Professor William Brown is from Xiamen University,
Yes.
right? And Jiang Dui also visited Xiamen University, and the founding president of Xiamen University was a Teachers College graduate, Deng Cuiying. And it was because of this connection, he invited Jiang Dui to give a speech at the opening ceremony of Xiamen University 105 years ago, around this time. So it's 1921, April 11th, if my memory serves me well. So with that historical connection, I think these pioneers will be very happy that we're doing this event to honor their legacy. So to start today's program, it's my honor to invite Professor Hu Ming, the chairman of New Channel International Education Corporation, Education Group, to offer opening remarks. Please join me in welcome Professor Hu.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, good afternoon. It is a great honor for me to be here in New York to witness the launch of my dear friend Professor William Brown's new book, West Meets East, Stories of Americans in China. Professor Brown is someone I deeply respect, almost like an elder brother to me. I admire his courage in leaving behind a comfortable life in the US and moving to China with his family. I'm moved by his dedication, driving across China to document the extraordinary changes that have taken place over the past 25 years. But what touches me most is the light in his eyes every time he tells a story about Americans in China. Several years ago, I first heard him talk about Wu Ling. Milton Gardner, a physics professor at the University of California, spent 10 years of his childhood in Wuling, a mountain village near Fuzhou. After returning to the US, his greatest wish throughout his life was to revisit the place he once called home. Yet he never had the chance. In his final moments, he was still murmuring the words, Wuling, Wuling. I was deeply moved by his story, and it made me wonder, what was it about China that could inspire such deep and enduring affection in someone from across the ocean? Not long after, I decided to visit Wuling myself. Standing beneath a 1,000-year-old cedar tree, feeling the mountain breeze, I could almost picture what life must have looked like there a century ago. Children from different countries playing together beneath the trees, people of different backgrounds sitting together over coffee, playing chess and sharing stories. It was a scene of harmony that transcended language and culture. At that moment, the thought came to my mind, if these precious memories are not recorded, they may disappear forever as generations pass. So I encouraged Professor Brown, write these stories down, gather them into a book. Let more people know that beyond political headlines, there are also simple, genuine, and deeply human connections between the people of China and the United States of America. When I received the first manuscript, I read it from beginning to end in one sitting. In these pages, we meet Uncle Han Zhi, who spent his entire savings studying Chinese characters. Gracie, an American girl who once wore the young pioneer red scarf in Fujian. The Courtwell family from Tennessee, whose connection with Fujian spans 4 generations. And of course, Professor Brown himself, whose own life has become part of his remarkable story. This book feels like a key, one that opens a door to the past. Through these real and personal accounts, we see that people from different cultures and political systems can still become friends, even family. The book is titled West Meets East. I like to think of it as a meeting, not just of places, but of hearts. Through 40 years of living in China, Professor Brown reminds us of a simple truth. What truly wins people's hearts is not the land itself, but the people who live on it. The Chinese value loyalty and human connection, while Americans often bring openness and sincerity. When these qualities meet, the result is not conflict, but the light of friendship. There are many more stories like these, and they deserve to be remembered. I hope this book will become a seed planted in the hearts of readers, and also a bridge that brings the people of our 2 countries closer together. Finally, I would like to say to my old friend Phil, thank you for spending half a lifetime building a bridge between East and West. And thank you to everyone here for taking the time to listen to these stories of friendship. May the friendship between the peoples of China and the United States grow and flourish, just like the 1,000-year-old cedar tree of Wuli, enduring and full of life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Wu, for your inspiring stories and experience. Your connection with Professor William Brown now make us be more eager to listen to those stories from Professor Brown. But before that, now let me just introduce another distinguished guest. Actually, I know him very well, like for over 20 years, everything I studied and then worked at Columbia University Teachers College. So it's my great pleasure to invite Professor Hervé Borin, the Gardner-Cowers professor of Anthropology and Education at Teachers College, Columbia University, and also acting director of the Center on Chinese Education. Professor Borin has been my mentor for over 20 years, and really I've learned a lot from him. And also he served on faculty at Columbia Teachers College for over 50 years. And his background being an anthropologist, we would like to hear his thoughts and reflections or observations after he read this book. Now let's welcome Professor Hervé Borin.
Well, thank you very much. I must say that I'm somewhat, let's say, I feel something like an interloper among you. I'm very new to China. They are few and very thin, particularly when I consider the experience of William Brown, a distinguished author, and I suspect the experiences of most in this audience. I have never lived in China. I only know of China in two very different and very partial ways. I know what a select group of senior academics have shown me as they welcomed me in various universities. And then also, in recent years, I also have been privileged to teach and advise many students from China, and they have shown me a somewhat indirect and ambiguous image of what it must be like to have grown up in China and crossed the Pacific to attend university here. And I now read William Brown's book, which will be for me another mirror of life in China. So I'm here today, as I have been several times since I've been taking the charge of the center, as a student, eager to ask questions and to learn more. So I was very glad, perhaps surprised, but really glad as well as honored to be asked to make some comments on the book and learn from it. So I do not have much direct experience of living in China, but recently I've learned something about the history of educational reform that may be directly related to the event tonight. And I want to thank Dr. Chang here, who over the years has insisted that Teachers College remembers its contributions to the kind of cross-Pacific intellectual exchanges that underlie William Brown's argument about what can be gained through these exchanges. Most of my colleagues at Teachers College, and that included me for my 54 years there, is not aware that young men and women from China came to study as early as the 1910s and the 1920s. And of course that some of them became very influential when they returned home. So we have not paid attention to the fact also that our most revered ancestor, John Dewey, spent 2 years in China lecturing around the country. I can tell you, most of the facts I was never told that. I was fascinated to discover his influence on such famous figures as, and I apologize for my pronunciation, Zhao Xinji, Dr. James Yan, and more surprisingly, Mao Zedong. Mao probably attended Dewey's lecture at Beijing University in 1919 and was part of those who invited Dewey to lecture in Henan. So I was fascinated when last year I was invited in several universities to be part of contemporary conversations about the continuing relevance of Dewey's writing about education. I would say that it may even be that Dewey is currently more seriously read in China than is here, in the most prestigious of American School of Education. So I was surprised because long time ago, my first years here in America from France, I read John Dewey and I said, oh my God, this is just another American. And so how could Chinese intellectual find this work interesting? I didn't. William Brown has answered the question for me. They do because the apparent difference may not be a problem. There may even be some unexpected affinity between the two civilizations. There may be something in American approaches to making a life that makes some strong sense among Chinese intellectuals and perhaps also the common people. But Brown also convincingly illustrates the reverse. Americans can make a good life in China. So, and the multitude of students from China that it is now my privilege to teach attest that the affinity goes both ways. They come to us in New York at great cost, not only financially and linguistically, but also personally. For these students, moving here from many towns in China has to be difficult, even for some who find the opportunity liberating. So of course I've often wondered what makes this crossing worthwhile. And I'm also all the more concerned that as an anthropologist, I'm trained in focusing, possibly overly, on misunderstandings across cultures and the way people rooted in one culture can hurt the people from the other place if they are not careful and unwittingly. So, but on the other hand, perhaps my training is incomplete. And I should not worry too much about to teach the students from China. So let me explain. I was struck by the saying William Brown quotes at page 2 of the introduction. We are
和而不同。
alike but different. Once we see how we are alike, our common, we can better understand and accept, even to embrace our differences.
不同。
I took this saying by Brown to be a wonderfully pithy way of summarizing the cultural anthropology I have inherited from Boas and Lévi-Strauss. All human beings, I still teach, are fundamentally alike. Boas, one of my ancestor figure, called this the psychic unity of mankind. But then Lévi-Strauss and other ancestor figures generalized the observation that one aspect of this unity is the ongoing making of alternate ways of doing the simplest things. And it was cooking, fingers, forks, chopsticks, marriage, and everything else. Many have stressed how difficult or worse can be encountered across alternate histories, but perhaps this does not always have to be the case. As William Brown attests, one may succeed at conducting a good life in the midst of what some might interpret as major differences. And of course, the title of the book he calls Classical Concerns, as I say, summarize in the title of the book by quoting the first lines of Kipling's Ballad of East and West. You may know, I'm sure you know that East is East and West is West, and never
The twain shall meet.
But few quotes the two lines that end
Yeah.
this opening stanza. But there is neither East nor West, nor breed nor birth, when two strong men stand face to face, though they come from the ends of the earth. Brown illustrates what Kipling may have been trying to say. Through the dozen stories of strong people facing each other, Brown shows how they produce something none might have thought possible to produce. And then things got interesting. As I explored the possibility that China might teach me something I had intuited in my recent work, but I didn't put it that way. So I'm sure that all of you here know that there are many translations of the saying. As Wu Guo, one of my students from China, taught me, may also be translated as seeking harmony without enforcing sameness, or in harmony yet not alike. So the saying may hint not only at the description of a state, but also as a goal to pursue. I searched further, and I discovered what I'm sure all of you learned long ago. The saying is part of a longer sequence.
From Confucius, right? Yeah. 君子和而不同，小人同而不和. That's the original lines from the Analect.
So this sequence can be translated in many ways, but it appears always to constitute an injunction. A good man seeks harmony but not conformity. A petty person seeks conformity but not harmony.
Yes.
This was expanded by, again, somebody had discovered in that search by the Chinese anthropologist Fei Xiaotong, to say, let every culture flourish in its own way, let it also recognize the beauty of other cultures, and all flourish together, the world will live in great harmony. I'd say that this is a good way to summarize where cultural anthropology has actually moved since the early Boasian years. Culture is not to be taken as a state of uniformity. Culture, and I much prefer the gerund form, as English is very good for having a gerund. So it's not culture that's important, it's culturing. It's about the ongoing effort to make a world for the people assembled by historical upheavals. This is usually interpreted in American social science as a search for order involving power. But Fei, and maybe the Chinese intellectual history on which he leans, may be a better interpretation of the ongoing effort to make a life. The effort may be precisely to seek harmony rather than uniformity. And as I age and I see the differences with my children, grandchildren, and so on, we want to be harmonious and we sometimes succeed. We don't always do it, but it's the search that is the important. So I conclude with thanks to William Brown for giving us further evidence that people can indeed find ways to live harmoniously together in peace and to cooperate to build a new future for themselves, their children, their neighbors, and many beyond us. So thank you very much.
So I hope you enjoyed
Thank you
this
so much.
flash lecture on cultural anthropology, right? Isn't it fascinating? And I remember last week we had a conversation at Professor Ruin's office. Those quotes, like the translation, which version is more accurate? Talk about a harmony or peace. Thank you so much. And it just reminds us about Zhang Dui. When he visited China, he also took his role as a cultural anthropologist. He observed a lot of actions or words, behaviors of his friends and people around him. He really helped us understand different cultures from Western perspective. Thank you so much. So, yeah, by the way, if in the future you want to learn more from Professor Marin, come to Teachers College. Yeah. So now let's move on to the central part of today's program, the moderated conversation with the author, Professor Braun. And I guess everybody's ready for it, right? So this session will explore the human stories behind the book and the deeper connections that has shaped the U.S. and China relations over generations. So it's my great pleasure to introduce our moderator first, Mr. Naren Arel, the CEO of Amplify Publishing Group, who came all the way from DC. Thank you for coming. And also joining our moderator, yeah, would you please come up here? Joining Mr. Arel is, we have, of course, our distinguished panelist, the author, Professor William Braun. And Professor William Braun is a professor of leadership and strategy at Xiamen University. For those of you who are not familiar with China, Xiamen, it's a beautiful city, and the campus of Xiamen University is among top 3, probably, right? If it's not top 1, because there are people from Peking University might be upset, right?
But they are wrong.
Yeah, exactly. And also we have another distinguished panelist, Professor Robin Harvey, Clinical Associate Professor at OYU, New York University. And also joining them, we have 2 individuals whose personal stories are featured in the book. Now, please join me in welcoming our special guest up to the stage. Take a guest here.
Okay, everyone hear me okay? It's a pleasure to be here. It's a special day. Launching a book is a culmination of a lot of effort, hard work, and dedication. And so you've done this a few times.
A few times.
Well,
a lot of help.
Yeah, well, today we're going to hear from the author, and we're also going to hear from Dr. Robin Harvey. And so to begin, let's dive into the book and the ideas in the book. And so, Dr. Braun, can you please introduce yourself and talk about your history with China? And I know you could talk for 2 hours about this.
2 days.
But let's have a brief introduction, and then we're going to hear from Dr. Harvey. I'm going to ask her the same question.
Okay, well, Bill Brown, well, first of all, I should say that I've been in U.S. 30 years and China 40 years, but it's really odd because when I was young, I had no interest in Asia, nothing in China. So I'll just tell you real quickly. When I wanted to go to Australia, that's what was my goal. I still haven't been there, but I applied to immigrate to Australia. And the Australian government replied to me, "We welcome men of vision like you, but you have to wait 10 years and apply again." Because they said, you have to be at least 18, and I was only 8. But I saw a magazine article, Opportunities to Go to Australia. I asked my mom and dad, can I go to Australia? They said, go ahead. Well, they didn't accept me, but they sent me a box of children's books, including this book. Now, You Can Draw a Kangaroo. And I memorized this book. I wish I had one, You Can Draw a Panda. But I still knew nothing about China, had no interest. And then in 76, the Air Force sent me to Taiwan. Now, I didn't know where Taiwan was, and when I saw it was right across from mainland China, I thought, we're going to go to war, I'm going to die. I gave my car to my sister because I thought I wouldn't come back. I did go back, but she never returned the car. And I remember I knew nothing about China, but my captain said, China is the greatest threat to world peace. 1 in 4 people are Chinese. I said, sir, I doubt that, because my family is 4 people, none of us are Chinese. I had like 50 push-ups for that one, but. And I got to Taiwan, and I fell in love with it within like 2 weeks, or within a week. I just fell in love with it. It's a beautiful place, but the key thing is the people. I couldn't speak Chinese, but the people. And I was there for 2 years. And when I left, I said, someday I want to go to the mainland, see the rest of China, and learn more about the history and culture. I want to learn Chinese. And it was 10 years later when I finally got to Xiamen with my wife, blonde-haired, blue-eyed American, born and raised in Taiwan, and my 2 sons. The oldest one is there. He's the kid on the left. He's taller now, but just as talky now, just as naughty now as he was then. And I was only going to stay 2 years and learn Chinese. But I only learned 1 semester because they said they were starting the best MBA program in China. I laughed. This is a little university on an island, right? But they asked me to teach because the American teacher left. I said, no, I came to study Chinese. I've been waiting 10 years. And they said, just 1 year. Give us time to find someone else. I said, okay, 1 year. And at the end of 1 year, they said, could you do it 1 more year? We still haven't found anyone else. I said, okay, 2 years, then I'm going. And then 3rd year. But the 3rd year, they didn't have to persuade me because by then, I really thought, this I never planned to teach, business. But if China is going to develop peacefully through business education is very important. So I just kept doing it and just kept going. And now it's almost 40 years later. So I had no desire to know anything about China, but kept going.
Hold it closer to you.
Oh, sorry, closer.
Yes, good.
So it really is ironic that somebody like me should be in China so long. But I love the place, and I've learned so many things about the country. I just hope some of you, if you haven't been to China, you need to go. Thank you.
So 1 year turned into 40.
40, yeah. But and later if there's a chance, I'll share that just especially I think the relationship between America and China is really special. I mean, I know your history, you can find a lot of stuff, mistakes and stuff like that, but overall, the more I learned about what Americans have done with China, I was really happy about that. In fact, I brought some books I have from over 100-year-old books to just show very briefly. I won't give a lecture, but.
We'll hear more in a moment. Dr. Harvey, please introduce yourself.
Thank you. So it turns out my journey was a little different. I started with studying language and then got to go to Taiwan and China. But back in the day, I wanted to study a language, and I thought, I will study Russian or I will study Chinese, because I wanted to do a language not many people studied. And it turns out that someone I competed with in French in high school was going to Georgetown, where I really wanted to go, and studying Russian. I did not want to compete with him in Russian in college, so I studied Chinese. And it was an entire semester. I didn't even think about the fact that I was going to have to learn to write in Chinese characters, in Hanzi, right? And at Georgetown, they teach Fantizi, traditional characters. So I fell into Chinese. I failed my first semester of Chinese, but my teacher picked a name out for me. And the name she picked for me is He Ro Bin, Wen Ro De Ro, Bin Bin Yo Li De Bin. And I thought, that's the most beautiful name in the world. And my French name was Renee. I hated my name in French my whole life. So I kept studying Chinese. And then I majored in Chinese in college. I studied in Taiwan. It was much easier in those days to go to Taiwan than to study in China. You had to stay in the foreigners' dormitories in China. In Taiwan, you could just live in an apartment. And then after that, I went into the travel business. Because in those days, you couldn't just go to the consulate and get a visa. There were group visas that came through 3 travel agencies in the United States. And one of them was Lee & Sons. The first one was Lee & Sons in Chinatown. And he had all the group visas. And then there was another company called Pacific Delight Tours that also got visas. And so I, for a couple of years, escorted tours to China and traveled all around China in the days of Meiyo, and Tianfanwan, right? So iron rice bowls, for those of you who don't know, it's like guaranteed jobs before China really opened up. And then I followed my real love, which was to become a Chinese language teacher. And I opened a language school, Chinese language school, to teach kids here in New York. And from there, went back and started training teachers at NYU. So if you have a child in New York City Public Schools, their teacher was very likely trained at NYU in our Chinese language Chinese language teacher program.
Amazing, thank you. So, Dr. Brown, we heard earlier the professor who asked you politely to consider writing this book.
He's very polite, but he doesn't accept no.
So, other than that, what are some other reasons that this project was important for you to take on?
Well, it was important for me because even after almost 40 years, when I got to mainland, I really wanted to understand China. And in '93, I bought a van. And drove 10,000 kilometers around South China when it wasn't good roads with my two sons and wife. And in '94, drove 40,000 kilometers around China to Tibet, Mongolia. I mean, it weren't good roads, but we did because I really wanted to see what is China really like. Because I saw the media about China. Before I moved to mainland China, I saw the media and it was so negative and dark. But when I got to Xiamen, I thought, these aren't like the people I see in the media. They're happy. It was undeveloped, but they were happy. It's better than it ever had been, and they had faith in the future. And I just fell in love with the people. I mean, Xiamen's a beautiful island, but for me, you don't move somewhere just because it's beautiful. That doesn't last long. We love the people. And I learned more, but then I keep watching the media in the West, especially America, and it keeps picturing China like I saw it in the '70s. And so I really tried to understand, and I started reading I traveled all around the country, interviewed a lot of people, read history, and I thought, Americans really need to understand China because we have so many ways that we're similar. And especially history, I just want to show you real quickly because a lot of us don't know I not only traveled around China and researched it, but I spent a small fortune for a couple of decades buying books written by foreigners in China 100, 200 years ago before some of this. Let me show you something. This, where is it? Okay. It's so fascinating. I learned that 300 years ago, the Western countries just really admired China and thought it was a wonderful country. Eustace Budgell, English politician, said that China has 4 great inventions, but its greatest thing is the art of government. And do you know Aladdin? A lot of people are surprised when I tell them Aladdin, when it was written 300 years ago, it was Chinese. I have over 30-something of the old Aladdin books from the 19th century. Why did they say he's Chinese? This is a Chinese boy. The first sentence, he's a young boy in China. Because 300 years ago, they thought, you write a story about Aladdin, the author had never been to China, but he thought China's a magical place, it's rich, so he wrote about Aladdin, the Chinese boy. We really admired China back then. And then things started changing, history, we know the Opium War and all that kind of thing. And because of trade and politics, we began to shift our focus. But if you really want to understand, just get beyond the surface of what we see about China today, and most people can't go to China and visit. But let me show you something. I think most people don't know this. Today, the media we see presents China as still the world yellow peril, the danger, all this kind of thing. But that's nothing new. After the Opium War, it made so much money, but Africa, my youngest son does volunteer medical work in Africa, the youngest son. And Africa is very poor today, even though it's so big and resource rich. Well, because we broke it into 50 colonies. But did you know they planned the same thing for China? Let me show you something real quick. This is from 1899, weighs a ton, The Breakup of China. This is a book published in England, and it's about breaking up China, just like they did Africa, and they have in there the different provinces and how they make money in the different places. And where I live is famous for tea, and they said they need to take over the tea because Chinese don't know how to grow tea, they don't know how to process it and sell it. And but China's not like Africa. China was one big country, and they said no, thank you. So the same year, I have 4 or 5 of these books, The Yellow Danger, China, The Yellow Peril. Another book too big for me to bring is heavy, China, The Yellow Peril, at War with the World. But in 1900, when had China gone to any other country and attacked them? They hadn't, but because they didn't accept what the plan for them, they became the Yellow Peril, and I have just so much about, they were afraid. So, but we have a lot to learn from China. In my book, I tell this story, China Coast Family. I bought almost 50 copies of this book to share with friends. It's a Tennessee family in China for 50-something years, and the story and the relationships with the people and the way they love the people and the way they love the Americans. And even in more modern times, we learned something from them. This was published in 1974 by the U.S. Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, Barefoot Doctor's Manual. We learned from China in '74. They got that from the Chinese, the Barefoot Doctor's Manual. They just translated it and said in the front. There's so much we can learn from China. So I decided to just write books like this, hoping to interest people in learning more about China, getting beyond the politics, learning about the people, and the culture, the science, and what we can learn from them.
So as a book guy, I love to see those books.
Yeah, yes.
And as a publisher, we often think about target markets. Who's going to be interested in this book? And this is really unique in that I think there's something in this book for the American market, and I think there's something for the Chinese market. And so I'll start with you, Dr. Harvey. What's in this book for the Chinese and the Americans?
Wow. This is a really great question.
Yeah.
Oh, the battery's gone. This is a really great question because when I work with, I train teachers to teach across cultures, to teach language and culture. And I think one of the things that we always talk about is telling personal stories, and that we can really learn through personal stories. You're talking about the Chinese peril and like what we see in the newspaper and what we see in books of propaganda about how dangerous each of us is. And it goes both ways. It goes
Yeah.
in China, the same thing is happening here. So I think that just reading all of these personal stories of people who have made their way in China and saying, oh, it's not really that different. It's not really that hard. It can be hard, but it's not that hard. I think that works both ways, right? Because often when our Chinese students come here, international students from China come here, they think it's going to be very different, and they come especially to New York and find out that there's much more that we have in common than we don't. I personally loved the stories that spanned time, so spanning history and understanding what it was like in the past, where people were, people moved there and were living a life which was shared across cultures until today. And I do have to say, I'm really glad we didn't have social media when I was traveling and living in China because it's much different now.
Yeah.
But
Thank you, Dr. Brown. Same question for you.
Behind it.
The applicability to the book to the American market and also the Chinese market.
Well, I think the main thing is when I first started writing books, I wrote them only in English. I wanted foreigners to understand China on a more personal level, people-to-people level, see how much we were so much alike. When we have our differences, but we're much alike as well. But I remember when I wrote one of my first books, I was in the Chinese bookstore, and I saw a Chinese who didn't know English with my book in one hand and a Chinese English dictionary in the other hand. And they were curious to learn how I looked at China. So I like these stories because I like for Chinese also to see how Americans who live in China and see it face to face, see China, appreciate China, learn from China. And it wasn't all smooth. I mean, they had their difficulties, but I think it's good for Americans to understand China. I think it's for Chinese to understand how Americans in China see them. And I think it gives Chinese confidence because when Chinese see how foreigners who see it face to face love it, I think it also gives them some encouragement.
In the preface, you draw a parallel or a connection between the American dream and the China dream. Can you talk about that a little bit? And
Well-
are they different?
Well, personally, like I tell my Chinese students, I mean, in China we talk about the Chinese dream, but America, we've been talking about the American dream since the 1930s. But in reality, although we didn't have that phrase, I think all people are dreamers. I've been to 30-something countries, I've been to very poor places. A lot of them aren't any better now than 50 years ago, but what do people want? What does the average person want? The dream is they want peace and they hope that their children will be better off than they are. They hope they have places, So I think people are dreamers, but I think most people in the world have no hope to achieve the dreams realistically. So the Chinese talk about the dream, and it's the same as ours. They're hoping that their children will have a better future than they have. They hope there will be stability, there will be peace. And they've had that the 40 years I've been there. I mean, it's improved consistently. As I'm amazed at how it's improved. And so I think in that way we're very similar. We're both dreamers, and I just
Thank you. Dr. Harvey, do you have anything to add there?
When we think about this dream, so you said we're all dreamers and you've been there for 40 years. And I remember when I first went to China and how I stood out. People would look at me. They call it the China stare, right? But so that was in the 80s, and I went back after I had kids. I was in New York. I had kids while they were growing up. I didn't travel to China at all, and then I traveled to China after 20 years, and I went to Shanghai and I went to Lujiazui. And in Shanghai, right, there's this. I could not stop. I could not lift my jaw. I just stared like walking around Shanghai.
The American stare.
This is the American stare, exactly. But just the dream, right? Just the dream that's there, and the watching the dream realized is an amazing thing.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that Americans don't realize at all, because we talk about, how China, we have to be careful with China. We have to be right. And I think people have this vision of China as being over there and very distant and very different. And people think that it's very low hope, right?
Yeah.
Backwards. And in reality, it's way ahead in so many ways. The Chinese dream has overtaken the American dream.
Can I say something about
please.
that? She said that we have the idea that China is low backwards, but I've had to go, because of my international MBA program, I go to Africa and Europe and Brazil, these different places, and it's so convenient in China now. I mean, people say, you must have seen a lot of change in China. I said, I don't see any change. We use the phone for everything, so we don't need change, no change. But it's so convenient for everything that we do. And when I leave China, I got to change money and trying to figure out how to get a taxi and all this. And so I told some friends a few months ago, I said, 30 years ago, I thought China was backwards. I said, now I think the world's backwards.
Last time, the first time I went back to China, the time when I just was like staring in Shanghai, I couldn't pay for my taxi from the airport because I didn't have WeChat on my phone. And I didn't have a bank account, so I couldn't use it.
In the book, you talk about the complexity and the fascination with the Chinese language that draws a lot of Westerners in. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? Richard Sears is one person that you highlighted.
Yeah, well, when I was in Taiwan, I fell in love with the language. But sadly, the 普通话, but 我到现在还是我讲的是不懂话, 不是普通话, 是不懂话. I still haven't got it down. But I love the language, and I love that you can see 2,000-year-old carvings or something, and that you can recognize a lot of it. And I went to Korea, went to a museum in Seoul. The government showed me this museum, and they had some 1,000-year-old things there, and I read them. They said, you read ancient Korean? I said, it's Chinese. They said, well, yeah. But the language is so beautiful, the written and the stories behind the characters and the tones and the poetry, and I just love the language, and I think it shows a lot of the culture. Here's a strange thing. I think China is one of the most modern places there is, but the longer I live in China, the longer I also think a lot has not changed. Because it still has the 2,500-year-old Confucian culture and values, and these things are still there in the society, reflected in a different way. And it's so beautiful and refreshing. So I have for 30 years been doing all I can to encourage American young people to go to China to learn Chinese. That's one of the best ways to know about China. And I said, it doesn't matter what your career is nowadays, what you plan to do in the future. In this world, if you can speak a little Chinese, it's an advantage. And I've had dozens go, I had set up one program with students from a dozen colleges and universities for an intense course in Chinese, about 10 years. And a lot of these just went for a free trip overseas. But after they finished that program, finished college, 1 out of 4 went back to China to work or study. That shows the power of China. 1 out of 4 went back.
Dr. Harvey, I see you nodding over there.
Oh yeah, what I love is when I studied Chinese in college, right? We studied for 3 years. After the 3rd year, we were studying. Is it not? No, I think I can do it.
Okay.
We were studying traditional characters, and we learned how to read newspaper headlines and all of that. And then 4th year, we got to study classical Chinese. And that, to me, was the big prize, to be able to learn all of to read all the old literature and start to really read Chinese poetry in Chinese. And it's like a puzzle. Chinese is like a puzzle in a way that English is not. English, you have to learn so many rules. In Chinese, you can kind of figure out the puzzle after a while. But I will say I did fail my first couple of Chinese character tests. So, and I train Chinese teachers now, so I obviously love the Chinese language. I train Chinese teachers in New York, and we of course, everything is integrated and interlinked with culture. So.
Dr. Brown, there's many of the stories are set in the Fujian province.
Mhm.
What is it about that place that enhances the cross-cultural nature of what you've experienced?
Well, Fujian is really special. My wife and I, from the day we met, we were talking about China, and we became best friends and went to Taipei to get married. And we wanted to go to China to study, but our goal was to go to Shanghai or Beijing. We'd never heard of Fujian, even though she's born and raised in Taiwan. I was there 2 years. We didn't know Fujian was right across the water. But we went to Fujian because, well, I love it when Chinese reporters, shaman reporters, why did you choose shaman? Why do you love shaman? I say, because we couldn't go anywhere else.
Right.
And that's true, because in '88, only Xiamen University allowed a foreign student to bring a family. That's the only reason we went there. But we fell in love with it, and we learned about the culture, and Xi Jinping had a big influence. He was in there, Fujian 17 and a half years, the longest place of anywhere, and in 2001, he encouraged me to write a book about Quanzhou, because of the ancient history there. And he said, you wrote about Xiamen, your second home, you should write about Quanzhou, your third home. And that's when I learned about the history, the start of the Maritime Silk Road. And then I bought a couple hundred books by foreigners, writing about it. And 100 and 200 years ago, they wrote that Fujian people, especially Minnan people, are the most open-minded people in China, the most warm, because for 1,000 years, they've been doing trade there on the coast throughout Southeast Asia. So he said they're very open-minded. They're used to people going in and out, foreigners coming in and out. When the rest of China was closed, Xiamen was open. And that goes even today. I mean, they're very open-minded people. When I went there, it was backwards at that time, but the people, and it was relatively poor, you could say, but the people treated us like family. And a lot of the people in these stories, it was the same thing. So Fujian is very special, very unique. And by the way, you've heard of the Belt and Road Initiative? That's probably because of Fujian, because Xi Jinping wanted me to learn about the ancient Maritime Silk Road. But I think he got the idea from for Belt and Road from that. And so Fujian is very strategic. And I thought I was only going to stay in Fujian 1 or 2 years and then leave. But still there. I travel all over China, but Fujian's home.
Dr. Harvey, do you have anything to add there?
No, I don't know Fujian very well.
Okay.
But I was thinking, when you were first talking about Xiamen and how you went in the 80s and it was a small town, we're talking small town, right? Thinking about how things have changed in the past 40 years. Is it 40 years?
40, total
Yeah.
40.
How things have changed in China and how much has grown. There was someone in your book talked about how they like the small cities, and the small cities are like 8 million people. Yeah. So.
Yeah, we have now, we're still a small city, but we have about 4 million total. And I told my friends, my hometown had 15,000 people. I tell my friends in America, we have more than that in a bus stop in China.
I live in New York, and Shanghai is just overwhelming. Right?
Overwhelming.
So one of the areas of overlap is the emphasis on business and innovation in America and also in China, of course. Can you comment, please, about how they're the same and perhaps how they're different, the world of business? I know this is a broad question, but you'll tackle it.
Well, Fujian's the perfect place to talk about innovation because a lot of the overseas Chinese throughout Southeast Asia, a lot of them came from Fujian. And I have a book from 1861. Throughout the 19th century, the Westerners, we were there basically attacking each other, and it wasn't so much business, I think, as piracy. I mean, if you have to use gunpowder and boats and navy, that's not business, that's piracy. But the Chinese, 1861, an American in Fuzhou, the province, wrote, I can just about quote it, he said that Chinese colonized Southeast Asia from Fujian, but he said they didn't conquer. They colonized, but they didn't conquer. And he said in every Asian country, 1861, he said there are a lot of Chinese there, and he said because of their superior civilization, their capacity for business, and their industry, they almost monopolized every area of business. They didn't use Navy or, it's just business. This is real business. I teach MBA. I said, this is real business. And then he said, and they become the leading spirits of the nations which they inhabit. 1861. And they did this business at the time when these other countries are fighting each other and using navies and armies and all that. Chinese did real business. So these are very entrepreneurial people. And I've written the stories of a lot of entrepreneurs in Fujian. Brilliant. These people, one of my favorite stories, he's in a different book. He didn't wear shoes until he was 14. Till he was 14. And he did hard labor. He worked on a boat fishing, and he dug tunnels, which was really hard. And he thought, I could do this better. And so he got some friends from his poor town to join with him, and they got a contract to do a small tunnel, did it, learned from it, dug a bigger one. Then he ordered books from the US, had them translated to Chinese so he can read them. He only had 4 years education, and he dug the first underwater tunnel in China, now in Xiamen, the highest railroad tunnel in China and Tibet. He dug it. When I drove around China, he went with me, spent 32 days. He's a billionaire now, but he spent 32 days showing me 70-something tunnels. I mean, this kind of story, and China is full of stories like that. But my favorite stories is not the billionaires. It's a street sweeper I knew, who 28 years at Xiamen University swept streets and retired, but his son graduated from university, and he was so proud of that. So these are entrepreneurial people.
Amazing. Dr. Harvey?
When you're telling the story, I think about when I was in China in the early 80s, and I was in Guangzhou. And at that point, there was very little, there was nothing happening. It was just the beginning of the opening up, right? And there were these young men wearing sunglasses, like kind of like not Ray-Bans, but like sunglasses with mirrors. And they just were this sign that something was starting to change. And there was obviously a hunger for trying to grow, for trying to make money and do business that hadn't been there before. And then also you would go to other places where people just were like doing their jobs to get by. But there was this seed starting. Like from Guangzhou, if we went to Hangzhou or Shanghai, even at that time, people were still kind of not having the entrepreneurial spirit yet. Hadn't reached there yet. Now it's so entrepreneurial spirit everywhere.
I very early told my family back home that Chinese are more capitalist than we are.
So I think it'd be fun now to hear from folks that have been profiled in the book. And we get to, so Gracie?
Yes.
I would love for you, and Anna.
No, please come up to the
Anna.
stage. Thank you.
Gracie has a lot of stories, and some are true.
Yeah.
So
Anna?
we'll begin by asking Gracie the same question you began with initially. Just tell us about your experience, your connection to China, and anything else you'd like to share in your introduction.
All right. So, like you said, some of it is true. I had to check the book real fast and make sure that my story was aligned. We do have similar humor, so if you can handle him, you can handle me. But it was. Thank
Well, I don't know.
But when I was 5 years old, my parents made the decision to move 5 of their children, all of us, to China to be professors, to teach English and computer science in a city about 2 hours from where Uncle Bill lives, in Fujian, China. And so before we went to China, we had an exchange student live with us, and I will share a little bit of my story, but you will have to read the book to find out the rest. But she was a PhD student. She stayed with us and tried to teach us some Chinese. Ironically, I was the only one that was very adamant about not learning Chinese. And I think when I moved to China, the only word I knew how to say was xigua, watermelon, right? But that quickly changed because once we were there for about a year, my parents decided to put me into Chinese kindergarten, which was the local kindergarten where all the other teachers sent their children to. I remember a little bit of that. I remember every day coming home and my mom would look at me and say, "What did you learn today?" And I would say, "I don't know, not I can't understand anything anyone's saying. And she's like, it's okay, try again tomorrow, you know, 加油, right? So about 6 months into it, apparently, I started mimicking what the other students were saying, and now that I'm also a language teacher, I understand a little bit how that works and how, you know, listening usually is what you first start picking up on. And so I would hear what they say, and then I would mimic, and then I slowly started understanding what I was saying. So after kindergarten, they did make me repeat kindergarten, so I had to repeat it
She
again.
failed kindergarten.
I failed kindergarten, so I'm a failure now. But so then I went to the local school. All my siblings were homeschooled because they were a bit older, and I was at the age that I could go in as a first grader. But I had to have special permission from the mayor of the province to go to this school because they hadn't had anyone that wasn't Chinese go there since the 1960s. So it was a real honor to go to that school, and I really was fully invested in my Chinese education. I talk a little bit about in the book how I really wanted to be part of the Shaoxian Dui. And so they invited me to, you know, the 少先队员 like 六一儿童节的一个活动, and we were there, and I was asking someone, was like, how do I become? So for those that don't know, the 少先队 is the Chinese Youth Socialist Party, and you can start to be a part of it when you're in elementary school. And so I asked them, I was like, oh, I really want to be part of, you know, the 少先队, and they're like, you can't because you're American. I was very sad, but I still wore my Holingjing every day. Another accomplishment was that I got the, just like, you know, other Chinese children, I had, you know, 最佳学习雷锋奖好像优秀班干部 right? So through and through I had okay, sorry. That one's tricky. Oh, that one's hard. You had to be there. Yes, it's an academic prize for being more like Lei Feng, and Lei Feng is a Chinese hero who basically did everything good that you can think about is from Lei Feng. So he inspires the Chinese people to be better, to help other people. So, and that's called Lei Feng Jingshen. So so I was, we can talk more and I can explain the spirit of Lei Feng. But so Chinese school was a great experience, and I learned a lot. All the children were very welcoming, and after elementary school, I did start to have some English education because I was lacking a little bit in that. Yes. So.
Well, that was excellent. Thank you so much. Hannah, we'd love to hear from you.
Okay. My name is Hannah, and I'm going to give you a little background. My husband had it. All right.
Just hold it a little bit closer.
Like that.
Yes.
All right. My husband has a business in Xiamen, China. So from 2004 to 2018, I went to China once a year or maybe twice as a tourist. In 2018, I retired and I moved there full time. So I thought, I'm not a tourist anymore. I got to live like a Chinese because, you know, when you go to Rome, you have to live like the Romans lived, right? So the first few weeks were very challenging for me because I didn't speak the language and I couldn't read. So I had to figure out how to go to the bakery, but I couldn't read Google Maps because it was in Chinese. But after that, you know, I figured out how to do it. And I started taking Mandarin classes, which was horrible. But I wanted to change my name because I thought I got to have a Chinese name. So I thought, Snow Flower would be a beautiful name. So my teacher said, you can have the name. It's something Wa. And I said, It's beautiful, it's romantic. He says, about war in China. You cannot have that name. And I said, okay, well, I keep my name, Anna, that's fine. They can pronounce it, that's fine. But one day my husband brought a newspaper in English, a local newspaper, and I saw there was a market. And I saw a Western guy there and something called One Rand. And I said, Thomas, you know what that is? He said, no, I don't. I said, well, okay, I'm going to find out. So when I went to school, I asked my teacher, and she said, it's an NGO. And I said, do the Chinese believe in volunteering? And she said, yes. I said, well, I'm going to go. So I went there, and I said, you need help. I can do a few things. And what I don't know how to do, you teach me how to do it, and I do it. She said, oh, that's great. Can you go on Friday to talk about American culture to this school? I said, sure I can, but I don't speak Mandarin. Are those English-speaking children? Oh, we need a translator. Oh, well, great, let's go. And just like that started my Chinese adventure. And after that, it was, Anna, can you start this little class for kindergarten, just little? Sure I can. And then there was, can you go for us to this hospital to do something? Or can you do, and when I went to China, I thought I was going to travel and see something very exotic because, China is fascinating. To my eyes, it's like going to another world. But what I found was a community. What I found was people that wanted to do things with me. I was so touched by it. I'm here, I haven't seen those people in like 2 or 3 years. They still write me letters, they still want to know about me. And I just fell in love with the country and with the people.
Thank you so much. Gracie,
Thank you, Anna.
what is the biggest misconception that Americans have about Chinese? You can pick the top 400.
Okay, I was gonna say.
Take the top
That's
400.
a hard question.
Please jump in.
I think Americans are afraid because when they go there, everything is in Chinese and they immediately got like, oh, I don't understand. They're not going to understand me. I don't know. They don't give themselves a chance. That's what I think.
Excellent. Gracie,
I would say, and I think it's kind of crazy that this is still a misconception, but so this summer I went to China with a American businessman that had never been to Asia, and his idea of how they do business in China, he thought that everyone was going to be wearing uniforms and living in the factory. And so I think that even though with social media and everything, being the way it is now, there are still a lot of people that think that, and I'm like, no, like we were saying, China is even more advanced, way ahead of where America is. So I think that's still a big misconception.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Anna, you brought something you were showing me back there.
Oh, yeah. Oh, when I was camping.
You just want to talk about what you had?
You just have to love the people. When I was coming back to the States, so they told me that you need to come to the NGO. So I went. And they have a diploma, and they make an album. They made an album for me for all the places I went to volunteer. And of course, it was China, so you had the video, the TV, the print newspaper, and then they're crying. I couldn't stop myself. If you want, I can show it to you.
Yeah, maybe, can we bring that up? Just, where's this is how you had it?
Is it at your seat?
It was my friend can give it to you.
Okay,
I'm sorry.
yeah, no problem, no problem.
Here
Here we go.
thank
That
you.
is beautiful, and I think everyone will really appreciate seeing this.
Gotcha.
Okay, tell us what you have here.
I have a diploma. It's a volunteer service certificate in Chinese and in English.
Excellent.
And I don't want to start crying, but I may.
Please don't.
And then this is the album with everything that
Okay, so this is an album and a bunch of photos. Can you tell us where the photos are from? And
all the volunteer work that I did every time that I went to do anything, they take a lot of pictures.
yes,
And I thought they just took the pictures and that's it. But no, they made this album for me and it just, I mean, I'm going to cry right now just thinking
It's
about
okay,
it.
it's
It was
okay.
so emotional for me that somebody can be so appreciative when you've done so little. It was like,
thank you
beyond
for sharing.
everything.
Thank you. You have an artifact?
I do, actually.
Where, put it on.
So, I have to do it the right way. It's been a while.
Give us a little background.
Here we go. So this, yes, I remember the picture. I remember the picture from the book. So this is a Holing Jing, which the best translation is red scarf, but there's a little bit more of a story behind that. Did you want to add something?
No, but I was thinking she wanted to join the youth league. My two sons wanted to join the Liberation Army. And I said, you probably can't. They said, why?
Yes, this was a part of being part of the Youth Socialist Party. But whether you were a part or not, you have to, everyone that went to Chinese school had to wear this every day. And if you forgot it, you would get in trouble and you would need to go back to the 校门口，然后再找叔叔买一个5毛钱, right?
Translation, please.
So if you forgot it, you would have to go out of school, go back to the front gate, and there would be like a little store. And they would always have these on hand because a lot of times the students would forget it. So
Amazing, thank you. Gracie, where do you consider home?
Putian, yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
I know that.
Putian, China, yeah, I would say.
Federal?
Shaman. Yeah,
Fujian.
I said, just Fujian. A lot of people ask me, said, no, I'm 70, am I going to retire and go home? And I said, I'm already home.
So I've got one last question for everybody here, and we'll start with Dr. Harvey first, make our way down. How do you expect China to play into your future plans?
So can I shift that a little bit and just say, as we listen to this story, and you told the story about the guy thinking he was going to go to China and see uniforms. The first time I went to China, I went with my mother, and we traveled from the south to Beijing, and nowhere did we see anyone wearing anything except like a blue suit. And we got to Beijing, and there was one woman wearing a skirt, and she was a foreign woman.
That was 81, right?
83.
83, yeah.
1983. So from that time, from that visit to China, from the time I started studying Chinese, I have always had just a desire to always be there, to always go back. And times have made it difficult sometimes to go back. But so the way that I've handled that is being in New York and working with Chinese language teachers and Chinese educators to hopefully have some kind of a legacy of working with Chinese language and culture and helping to grow understanding among students in New York City and hopefully further abroad. So that's my continued plan, is to keep training teachers to teach Chinese language and culture.
Gracie?
So a little bit of continuing what I'm doing now. So I graduated from Xiamen University, and since then have been living in America but traveling a bit back to China when I have the chance. I work in business, but I also teach Chinese, and that has been a big part of, being that bridge, building that bridge between China and America. And a lot of times people come to the language school and they look at me and they're not expecting me to be the Chinese teacher. They're just not expecting.
That stare that we talked about.
Yes, and then, but immediately, just I love to share Chinese culture and to share the, like, Chinese language is so beautiful. I've taught English for many years. I could do without teaching English ever again. English is a beautiful language, but Chinese is so, there's such a story to tell. And, you know, like we were all saying earlier, you know, it's about the people. And it's about sharing those stories. And everyone that's here has some story that, you know, connects them and connects China and America. And as a little kid, I always said, you know, I want to be a bridge between China and America. I want to be like Bill Brown when I grow up. So I hope.
I want to be like her when I grow up. She's already graduated so young. I've been at Xiamen University 38 years. I still haven't graduated. But I still hope to study Chinese someday.
So Dr. Brown, let's skip you, and I'm going to come back to you last
Well,
as we close up.
I hope I can keep traveling. I know I'm visiting my good friends over there. It's good for me.
Excellent. Dr. Brown.
What?
Same question to you. Perhaps it's a little obvious, but maybe you can elaborate on what your future plans are relative to China, period, or just life for you.
Well, basically, just keep doing what I'm doing now. I'm traveling. I just spent 2 weeks in a minority village, set 8 ethnicities, a little place of 400 people on the border of Tibet, Shangri-La, and learning about that. And I've been to every province and a lot of places. But Professor Hu Min is the one that really gave me the dream to write about all this. He took me to minorities in Yunnan and in Hunan and these different places, and he helped me with the trip around China 2019 to see the changes. And the more I see, the more fascinating it becomes. And I keep thinking, well, I've seen enough, I've written enough, but I could be there for many lifetimes. So I just want to keep learning, keep writing, and keep encouraging Americans to come there, because I think we do have. Oh, let me from the book. I just want to make one quote. I have the book? Yeah. Let me read this to you from the Fujian governor, not Xi Jinping. He was a governor, but this is from. Oh, I want to read this one quote from the Fujian governor who went to the 4th of July in Xiamen, and he gave a toast to America for the 4th of July in 1891. He said, 1891, no matter what happens, it needs no prophetic gift to know that the 20th century will see at the forefront of the nations of the world, China in the East and America in the West. Well, may we pray that for the welfare of humanity, their purposes in the 20th century will be as peaceful and upright as today. Unfortunately, the 20th century wasn't peaceful or upright, and this 20th century is not doing too well. But if we can work together, I think we can do better.
The book is West Meets East, of course, and if you look at the way the W, West, and East, the E in East, sort of align. It's not you, it's not me, it's we.
That's French. Oui.
That's right.
Oui.
So if you're going to copy, what's really important as we launch a new book, any new book, is to share it with your networks, review it, and really support this.
Oui. I didn't notice that.
So thank you all.
That's cool.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much.
That's so cool. I
Really,
didn't notice.
we
We.
work together, right?
That's
so,
cool.
And also, like, I read
That was
the book
my
and,
idea.
the quote from 135 years ago.
But I had the idea of the coffee cup, the teacup.
That really still, you don't need to change anything. Like you can reuse that quote at an event 4th of July, right? So that says a lot about these people that really have visions. We talk about Zhang Dui, we talk about the governor of Fujian, and also what I like about the book and this event is, being a Chinese living in the U.S. for 25 years, I'm still learning about China, my home country, from someone who's supposed to be outsider. I mean, in this case, Professor Brown, in his book, taught me a lot of things I have never learned before. I mean, like Pu Tian, like Resi's story, and other people's story. Like, I know a lot of Chinese people, and sometimes I told my students, don't just assume you're from China, you know
Right.
about China, or you know more about China than people who are foreigners. So I think that's something very important for us, learning from different perspectives, and vice versa. Like, people in the U.S., as Professor Burin mentioned about, and also Professor Alabronte mentioned about, there are a lot of things about U.S. where Americans, you don't know. And it takes people like me to take them to China to get to know more about John Dewey, Paul Monroe, and many other Americans, right? So the process has to be, we're talking about bridge, right? So the bridge has to be, both ways. Otherwise, it's not a bridge, right? So it's a reciprocal. That reciprocal relationship is so important to sustain. And also, it's a mutual benefit. Paul Monroe, back more than 100 years ago, he coined this term called cross-fertilization of culture. It's really a process we mutually benefit. It enrich our life, cross-fertilization, right? So, this event, your book is exactly the opportunity for us to learn and to be enriched and to be empowered. Thank you so much. Dr. Brown, question for you.
Hello. You also have the answer?
Chen Zhong.
Chenzhou?
It reminded me it's the only true port of entry legal at the time for foreigners, foreign missionaries. So how do you compare the American missionaries and missionaries from other Western countries? Their work, their style? But for example, my finding is for American missionaries, the more focused to general public. But from other countries, they tend to be more diplomatic and polished, like they deal with the ruling Democrat, for example, the tomato. So do you have a comparison of American missionaries and other countries?
Thank you. This is a very academic question, right?
Okay.
Would you introduce yourself, for the next audience? If you ask a question, please briefly identify yourself.
Just nobody. Just
Oh, no,
No.
That's
The
somebody.
second question is, in the year of 1894, the Arthur Henderson Smith wrote
The what?
book. Arthur Henderson Smith
Yeah.
Wrote the book, The Chinese Characteristics. So,
I have that.
as time goes on, do you have any, you would like to add something to the book? Because 27 chapters, tally the 25 the Chinese characteristics. Some of them might change or might fall. So your idea.
Okay, well, I have the Chinese characteristics. So the first edition of that is a brilliant book, I think. But it's been so long since I read it, I don't remember. So about the missionary question. Oh, by the way, I will tell you, people ask me, when I live in Xiamen, in China, do I ever have culture shock? And this is a secret. I've gone to over 30 countries, I've never had culture shock. You know why? Because I have no culture, so there's nothing to shock. But the missionary question, just the difference between like the Europeans and the Americans, one thing is a lot of the American missionaries were like China Inland Mission. They didn't have such a high academic standards. But they really sacrificed the things, the situation, the way they lived. But you should know the first Protestant missionaries were in Xiamen, where I live. 1848, we have the first church in China. Shannon and his Chinese wife were married in that first Chinese church. And the reason the first missionaries went to Xiamen was because before the Opium War forced China open, they were throughout Southeast Asia, but the Chinese throughout Southeast Asia, most of them spoke the Minnan dialect, the South Fujian, because it was the South Fujian people in Guangdong that went overseas. And the European and the American missionaries, the educational level was different. But one thing that's interesting is, in spite of this, in Xiamen and Minnan, it was very unique. They worked together because they had these denominations, and they competing against each other and fighting each other even. But in Xiamen, they said, this is hard enough to just survive. Let's work together. So 3 denominations worked together, and their denominations back in Europe and U.S. got angry, wanted to kick them out, but they gave in. And they had this idea called Three Self. You heard of the Three Self Church today? That wasn't the communists that thought of the Three Self idea. That was the Xiamen missionaries in the 1850s, and it made sense to them. And that was, the church became so powerful because it was the Chinese basically running their own churches, not the Westerners running it. In the 1890s, they used that philosophy from Minnan to go to Korea. And with a big effect as well. So it's very interesting. And but Fujian, so we had the first Protestant churches. We also had 3 Franciscan cathedrals 700 years ago, and 7 Muslim mosques, and also that whole area of Fujian, especially South Fujian, the history is so rich. I hope you'll come visit there.
Thank you so much. I also want to add, one of the first women's college, missionary college, Huanan 学院, was also founded by American missionary, and the second president was Teachers College graduate.
I also have the book they wrote about that.
Yeah,
First
she
edition.
published her doctoral dissertation 1919. It's about women's education in China. Her doctoral dissertation,
And in Xiamen in the 1850s, they did the education for the blind. They did the Minnan dialect in Braille. They had the education for girls there. They had the first medical colleges in Xiamen. So it's a very unique place. I'm very proud of it.
Thank you. So maybe 2 more questions because food is here. So yes, please.
Yeah, I just very simple questions. I appreciate Professor Brown. You are in the Xiamen for a long time. I appreciate us. I like the city too. Okay. When I was a professor, I always fly back from Shanghai to Xiamen. So I like city, but I'm a little confused about how you get touch of the community life and with Chinese community. And you working in the university. It's very beautiful campus. I was wondering, do you hear something about the Red House in Xiamen?
The Red House?
Yeah. Or sometimes we call it the Red Buildings.
You're talking about the corruption thing and right?
I'm just very famous,
Yes,
career, and I just want to know how you connect and penetrate the culture and cross culture. What's you thinking about communities?
Oh, you don't mean Red House? Oh, because Red House, because that was in the year 2000, the big 10 billion corruption thing, the Red House in Xiamen. But you don't mean that, right? No. You mean,
I've been there.
Yeah.
I have checked this another house.
Oh, okay.
And I know this whole side. I just wondering, you be there or not?
Okay, well, I'll tell you about how do you get in touch with the community. It's not hard to get in touch with the Chinese community because they get in touch with you. When I moved there, we were happy to finally get there. We were married 7 years before we got there, and it was our dream. But when we got there, we felt lost. It was so difficult to get used to so many things. And because it was the first university to let a foreigner bring a family, but they hadn't worked out details like food. They said we had to eat in the dining hall, but we couldn't use cash. We had to use the ticket. I said, where do I get the ticket? They said, we can't give you the ticket yet. So, well, then how do I eat? You can't use cash, you use ticket, but the ticket you don't give me. Well, they worked it out fairly quickly. But other Chinese teachers heard about this, and they said, oh, we'll give you some of ours. I said, well, then you won't have enough. They said, no, we have too much. We never use them all. So I was naive. I believed it, and so I used theirs. They fixed it in 2 or 3 weeks, but months later I found out. At that time, even if they didn't share, that they never had enough. But they lied to me and said, we have too much, we never use it. And so, and at the holidays, it's just time for Chinese family, not for outsiders. But we were there without family. Every holiday, some Chinese invited us to their home to spend the holiday, the whole day on Chinese New Year. And they're always inviting us over for tea or to eat with them or to go to the beach with them. So my experience, and not just in Xiamen, I've been to every province, everywhere I've gone, the people are open, hospitable, and they...
This is what is very simple. My question is to you. Okay. You used to be working and teaching in Shanghai University. You mentioned.
Oh, I went to school in Xiamen University.
Oh, not
Not
Shanghai.
teaching. No,
I'm from
Xiamen.
Shanghai University, professor. So
no. Xiamen 大学.
Sorry. Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi, hello. Oh, wow.
Wow.
So,
Wait, my
I'm a university student. And,
Yes.
So I was listening to you speak about how the East and West, we don't really have differences when it comes to our goals. We want peace, we want to be happy. And it got me thinking, and also with the quote in the beginning regarding harmony and conformity.
Mm-hmm.
I come from a background where I'm stuck between two cultures, where I was born in South Africa, but I'm Chinese. And what I understand of Western culture is that they seek peace through individuality, versus in China, it's more peace through harmony. I'm curious of your thoughts on whether that individuality and harmony are mutually exclusive, or is there a certain point where one outbalances the other?
Okay, well, when they say, they emphasize harmony and diversity. These, I just spent 2 weeks in Yunnan and Shangri-La near Tibet. I was in a village of 400 people, and they had eight ethnicities in that little village. And these people are amazing because they're so different, the cultures, but they're like one little family. I mean, they all work together, live together peacefully, and you say, well, that's just one little village. But I'm especially interested in minorities in Fujian. And I've been there, but also many places that Professor Humin has taken me. And in China, it's very unique. In most of this is really interests me. In much of the world, minorities are, and I know you've heard stories about China and this, but I've seen this. Everywhere I've gone, the minorities, and I have many minority students, the minorities in China, they live in these different places and they celebrate being different. They're not looked at, they celebrate being different. The government does all kinds of things to help them. For example, when they had the one-child policy, which you all know about, but minorities could have 2 children, which was a big sacrifice for the Han Chinese who love children. And they do all kinds of things. For example, the Xiamen University, the minority students that I know very well, and I know their stories, and I've been to their homes. The government has different projects and stuff to help them improve their education, but also to encourage them in different ways to preserve the culture. But it's different, difficult. Just I saw a few days ago how it says China is going to destroy human rights because the children now have to use Chinese in their studies. But I've been to these minority schools where they use the minority language for 3 years or 5 years, and if they do that, it's hard for them to catch up and then go to university. And in America, my grandmother's Native American, but they didn't use Native American language when they went to school. This is really awkward for China. They've struggled with this, and so they're trying to find ways to preserve this uniqueness and celebrate it because it's cool. I mean, they really feel minorities are cool. In our school, we have all kinds of activities, minorities dressed in their costumes, and it's not a political thing. They're proud of this, and we're proud to have all these minorities. But it's my experience is that the Han Chinese, vast majority, they like having minorities in their country. It's very different. So I'm still learning about it, but again, I've been to every province. I've visited these people in these different places and seen the changes over the years. And I don't know anywhere else that I've been to in the world where they really, it's like proud of this. But they have problems, I know that. You have 1.4 billion people. We don't have that many here, and we have problems here. But I really appreciate their.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for your question. So we have one final question. Anybody want to take the opportunity? We have several hands up. So yeah, thank you.
I happen to be one of the minority in China, and I'm from.
I'm a minority too. There aren't many foreigners.
Oh, you are? I'm one of the minority called Jingzhu, like located in Guangxi, and we only have 20,000 people living in China. Yeah, and I'm currently an NYU MBA student, and I know that you are an MBA professor in Xiamen University, and I'm so nervous right now, I forgot what I'm going to ask. But I guess my question is, as an MBA professor in Xiamen University, and you've been teaching for about 40 years in China, what difference do you see Chinese students in Xiamen University versus students in the US? What do you see different between those groups?
Well, I think the differences are increasingly small. In the beginning, they were completely different. When I first started teaching MBA, it had just come out. People didn't know what it was. A lot of people thought it was NBA, Basketball Association. And we had to pay students to come. I mean, we paid students to come. And one professor complained, Chinese professor complained, we give them everything but their wife. And but it's changed now. They pay us very well. And in the beginning, they were very different American students. At the beginning, I asked for 3 years, I asked the students the first day of class, what's the most important MBA program, MBA course? And every time they said English. I said, you're crazy. Why don't you want to go study English? But it was because their goal was to leave China. So they want to learn English. And so I quit asking. I said, why do I want to teach business? They don't want to study English. But 15 years later, I started to ask again. And then it was different answers. So now they're learning business because they think it's useful, and useful for them in China, which was different than 30, but I understood 30 years ago, they all wanted to leave because there weren't many opportunities. I mean, working for a private company, there weren't that many private companies, there were if you're really willing to work. I have some of my students from 35 years ago that did very well, but so the students, today I see that I have an international program, one MBA, that I'm the academic director of the past 12 years. And it was ranked at one time in the FT rankings in the top 30. It's not now because we a lot of change with the COVID. But we have 5 colleges in 5 countries and students from dozens of countries. And we go to the different countries each semester and work together, do projects together. And the Chinese students, in the beginning, it's like the other countries, especially the European Americans, it's like dominated. But today, Chinese students are more confident. And I thought it was so funny. One Dutch guy said of a Chinese university, Xiamen University girl, female student, he said, when she first started, she wouldn't open her mouth. I said, what about now? He said, now she won't shut her mouth. But he's joking. He really admired it. So it's a big change. But to see the Chinese students working with these students from 20 other countries as equals. And before, the Europeans, especially Europeans and Americans, kind of looked down on the Chinese students and also down on the Brazilians and the Mexicans too. But now they look at them as equals, as peers. So it's getting closer.
Good, excellent. I think that's very fitting. This is the last question for us to think about. We just want to be equal, right? Equality, equity, that's what...
respect.
Yeah, respect, because it's now like people are saying, oh, China's a threat. If you're moving up, being equal become a threat.
Yeah.
That kind of mentality, it's not equal, right? So, I think today's event really echoes what, when this institute, China Institute, was founded 100 years ago, when Dewey, Monroe, and many American educators, they see the values of learning about China, learning from China, right? So because as Dr. Brown just mentioned, American people know so little about other parts of the world, or maybe America itself, right? Let alone China. So I think back then they convinced the U.S. government to pay back China the second Bakhtin Indemnity Fund, which is back then the currency was over $12 million. So that's a lot of money. So most of the fund used to support Chinese schools, Peking University, Nankai University, but the only program, that's all located in China. the only program from that fund located here to establish this institute. It's just because they want more American people have a chance to be exposed to Chinese language, culture, having people like you, like other people coming here regularly to educate us. So I think after 100 years, I mean, the spirit still goes very strong, right? It's even more important than before that we have this kind of dialogue where like overseas Chinese want to learn from Professor Braun. You've been to 30 provinces of China. I only been to 20 provinces, so you know more about China than me. So yeah, this kind of exchange of ideas, perspectives, really mutually beneficial. So with that, I hope you have a chance to read the book and then keep in touch with Professor Braun. Visit him in Xiamen or other corner, like in a village in Yunnan, or different places, or maybe get involved in some of the programs that you all like are doing. So just keep this friendship, keep it flow. Thank you very much again, and thank you to our distinguished panelists. Thank you for traveling all the way from different parts. And also thank our audience and thank our host sponsor of this event. I really appreciate it. And also a quick heads up. This year is the centennial anniversary of China Institute. So please stay tuned. Check the website. There are many fascinating programs, talks, exhibitions coming up. So please come back here more often. Thank you very much. And by the way, the Chinese food is in the back. You probably smelled it. It's time to enjoy it and have a chat. Thank you very much.